I guess one of the things I'm curious about is you both have, I guess, like a hybrid setup. Like you've got an instrument and some stuff.
Sure.
Like I guess it's a question, I guess, for both of you. But in the sense of like, how do you negotiate your different levels of instrumental layers? Meaning like your instrument, your instrument, your instrument, your instrument, and your like what is your relationship to that? Multi-stage instrumentness.
Do you want to try?
I'll try. Well, I've been working with this instrument in various iterations for 33 years.
Okay.
The meta trumpet thing I was working on at the beginning was all about folding any compositional ideas and what we still call improvisational ideas and the physical relationship with the instrument and the sort of sonic relationship with the instrument into one thing, into one space, to then allow it to reform, to rearticulate in different ways, rather than separating score from instrument, from player, from improvisation, from composition. So that's what I've been working with for a long time. It went through all sorts of iterations. I worked with A-Life systems a lot, always trying to avoid telling the thing what to do, always trying to avoid the thing doing random stuff. A lot of experiments in searching for emergence and that sort of thing, trying to find things that were going on that I was too stupid to notice. And that's resolved itself into various areas of operation. So in here I've got all sorts of things. Nothing works independently of the trumpet. I've stripped back. I used to have sensors on everything. I mean, really everything you can imagine that could be sensed was sensed. We did all sorts of experiments, and now that's really reduced to, it's a very pointy instrument. So movement is still in there. And the recent movement sensors give you they give you Euler angles directly, rather than having to do math that I'm not capable of doing on 9 axes. Pressure sensors, because trumpet players tend to press the trumpet quite a lot. So they've always been there. Various switches to redirect stuff. That's the essence of what's here, and then various other things come and go. So everything is piloted from that, all the material, any pitch material, movement material, rhythmic stuff, that all comes from the inputs, from what's actually going on.
Like there's not a parallel process that is like you will activate.
There's no sort of no, exactly. Yeah. And we kind of exchange each other's outputs.
So yeah, that's the thing that for me is almost the opposite. For a long time, I stopped playing guitar, and before that, all the guitar and electronics thing that I did was kind of to mask the timbre of the guitar, because I wasn't really in love with it.
It's a terrible instrument.
But so now, going back to it, I do my best to actually preserve the guitarisms from a timbre perspective, at least, which also forces me to kind of, when I jump onto the modular or the other electronics, I have to stop and I have to jump into it.
Okay.
So this no longer activates things that are playing forever, and what has been interesting is that the exchange of information and all the, let's say the somax thing that is happening is taking the feed from the clean instruments as well. So when we hear ourselves transform, is another guitar and another trumpet fighting back at us.
Interesting. Okay. So what you send to each other are not what you're sending.
No, we send clean instrumental.
Okay.
Yeah,
Interesting. All right.
Yeah.
And to be used as sound,
Yeah.
to be analyzed and manipulated.
Was that always the case from the beginning of playing?
We tried different things.
No, we tried different things. Okay. At some point, I was like looking for this module that is that you can have a little Wi-Fi server, so you can pass and send OSC material.
Yeah.
But I mean, these things get perceptually complicated very quickly.
Yeah.
Which doesn't mean that they're very interesting, because most of the time, when we were not doing what we're doing now, the running joke was when it was over, there was always 1 or 2 or 3 things that kept that were left unattended, and it's like, well, it's not me. This time it was you. So,
Little sonic orphans.
Yeah.
So being close to a volume knob is always useful.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, and I guess the one of the main differences, and I don't know if this is the case for you, but for me that, because I'm playing an acoustic drum, obviously I can have other kinds of things, but I am making an acoustic sound that is louder than, I can't do acoustic sounds silently.
Yeah.
So like it'll always be, regardless of what I'm doing, it's always in addition to a thing, in a way that like for you, like you could have this completely audibly silent, but it's still doing the stuff.
Yeah.
So you can produce instrumental gestures that are decoupled from sounding results in a way that's kind of different.
Yeah.
Which I do find interesting, and it's a conscious thing. I do have no shortage of other things, but I do like having still some kind of acoustic generation separate from electronic speaker movement, you know?
But I think that's also very interesting, because to me, it's beyond the strictly sonic situation. There's something about the gesture, no? That you have a physical action that creates a sound, either it's pushing through something or hitting something, and that is visually present. That is, it has a sonic consequence, and I think that what is interesting is to play with this idea that sometimes you're doing this and nothing is coming out, or is displaced, or in the case of having these other trumpets and guitars, sometimes that you start imitating things that are slightly off, but at the same time you remain rooted in performance to this indivisible consequence of your physical actions.
For sure, yeah.
Which I think that in the purely electronic domain, I don't think that it's not interesting, but I think that is such an arbitrary thing that unless you take it as a compositional performative action, like this button, this thing, this will be the range, and then let's say the theatricality of the live performance, it gets diminished. No?
Yeah, I mean, I'm aware, like for me, I definitely appreciate that, and it's a happy consequence, and that it looks like I'm doing stuff. You know, and like I am doing stuff, but like, so that projects a certain kind of energy and gesture, non-sonically, which I think is nice. It's not super critical for me, but it is nice. But I think there's something about I am a big fan of gesture and multi-dimensional gesture, meaning like often instrumental stuff. Because even if you have, let's say, like all of your motion sensor, like it can produce a lot of multi-dimensional data. Sure. It's largely independent axes in a way that anything that you do coming out of the instrument or on this thing is intrinsically multi-dimensional. Like the timbre of the string is decoupled from pitch, or is coupled to pitch rather.
Yeah.
And everything like dynamic, like all of these things are like intertwined in a way that's intrinsically complex and nonlinear that can produce more nuanced and complicated things in a way that if you just had 9 dimensions of sensor data coming out, it's all multidimensional, but they're all non-correlated. I mean, there's a physical thing of like, there's impossible movements, but like, so I do think there's something about like having a complex multidimensional gesture that's produced, which, instrumental or physical things do that by nature.
Yeah, no, that is true.
I think you sense the presence of a human as well. I mean, there's the physicality. You get it's like watching someone walk down the street, right? You kind of form a bit of an impression of them just from that. And I think from hearing their physicality, you can't help but develop some kind of relationship with the individual.
Yeah. I mean, I agree, and it's one of those things that I appreciate, but again, isn't massively like I do like the idea of like non-human agency and performing. Like I think there's like interesting things there, but for sure, like it is nice. I very much like it. There's some things that like that just looks good and sounds nice, and in a way that is like I can't decouple my brain from thinking that.
But it's also a matter of, I mean, the choice of dragging all this stuff around and looking for gigs and all that is connected to trying to make a music that still has embedded that layer of sharing. I don't want to say communication, because then you talk about language and that's a bit too meta when you're doing these things. No. But what I'm trying to say perhaps is that maybe the non-agency or the idea that many things that are mediated, like network or telematic mediated, and in there, of course, you can do whatever you want in terms of time displacement, in terms of having people doing all this and not hearing them, because you can decide when or what is being audible or not, and that creates glitches. No, it creates semantic and perceptual conflicts, and which are interesting to explore, but I think that they demand a kind of a compositional structuring. You demand thinking about it. If this is a generative patch that you interact with from the distance, so it doesn't have to be here, then you have to have a reason for that. If you bring it here, then the reasons change. And to me, it's like, well, have access to big knobs that are at least wet-dry mix. So when you turn something, there is enough of a perceptual change, at least for me, that I know that, it's not like something happened, but it happened because you're there. And I think that this kind of fragility of the more complex these things become and the more nonlinear they become, of course, that there's more interesting consequences to your actions, but there's still this negotiation in front of an audience or in front of fellow musicians between decision making and happy accidents. But it has to be a flux. It cannot be only happy accidents or just let the machine do its thing and then you take a peek from time to time. Then you're giving this otherness too much agency to. That's my feeling.
Yeah. I mean, I guess there's whole like perspectives and views and movements on music that are grounded in specifically that kind of as an aesthetic, which for me isn't as interesting as some of the other stuff. Like I do like, and even now talking about the systems, like I've got modular stuff which I do use in performance from time to time, but it's always in that case always coupled to some analysis from what's happening. Like I don't for myself like the idea of having a system that's doing its thing. Yeah. I mean there are aspects and layers of things that are like decoupled from stuff, but for the most part they're like similar to what you're describing, like I'm doing stuff to actuate these things, and if there's some kind of, not LFOs, but if some kind of processes that are in the background doing stuff that I can then tap into or not is a different thing. But most of the sounding results will be coupled from that. Even to, like, as a basic thing, like a loop pedal type idea is like very easy to set up and let it go, and it's doing its thing, and then like forget about it, you know, which is.
Yeah, and I think that it's also fine. I mean, it's not that everything has to be a one-to-one mapping or correlation, but it's more. It's again this kind of the orphan children that you put into the world. You have to have some sense of responsibility towards them, at least to recognize that they were yours at some point, no? At the very beginning. At least. Yeah.
I mean, in this setup, it was really interesting because I knew that you had interpatched, but I didn't know what was on them. And because of my main microphone that I use for like all the friction stuff is an Omni microphone, it's very common that when I'm playing with someone else, there's it ends up in there. But I was hearing stuff I was hearing trumpet stuff that wasn't you doing it, and it wasn't obvious to me that you had set a process in motion from what you were doing. And similar with the guitar, and I wasn't sure of like, I was like, okay, I assumed that there were some like long loopers going independently from each of you, but I guess this was like where I don't know the specifics. But
it's recognition stuff. It's looking back through the total recording of what we've played so far. And there's another thing that is taking rhythmic things from what we do and then looking for rhythms like that.
Okay, all right.
And then making little grooves out of those every now and then, just temporarily, so they pass, and then they're always slightly off, so that you never actually establish a groove.
We always leave room to invite a drummer to play with us.
Exactly. Yeah.
Because we like that.
Yeah. I mean, it's a nice classic combination of instruments.
Absolutely.
Nice jazz trio going. So it was like an odd meta moment in that, like, I am used to bleed interaction and I'm used to hearing other, but like it was like there were orphans that I couldn't account for, and I didn't think were either of yours either, just from like what was happening. So I was like, I wasn't sure what it was like. Did I do something?
Ghost in the machine.
Yeah.
No, I use modular stuff in the same way as you described. When I can muster the energy to carry it around on top of everything else. But I like the idea of that. I keep the analog and the digital completely separate. So the modular stuff is entirely analog.
Right. Okay.
And generates a different character that way. But all of its parameters are derived from, they're sent from here.
Yeah, that's like a quarter of my modular is like expert sleepers. In and out and stuff.
Yeah,
just to
exactly
do
that. Yeah, the ES9 is what brings it all together. Absolutely. Yeah.
Should we play some more?
Yes.
That's a very good idea.